Jack's research is going well. He is on a wave of mental energy, released after the upheaval in his life, and is looking forward to his time in the library. For a few hours, he can forget about Caroline. Working at the bank now seems to him like a prison sentence served long ago. When he does think of Caroline, he finds that the distance gives him a new objectivity. So, she's human. She's screwed up and must deal with the consequences. It's not his fault, and he has no reason to feel guilty. More than ever, he realizes how much he looks forward to spending time with his children and how vulnerable and precious they are. His part-time job is made possible after several arguments with his professor. He vigorously defends his views on the impact of government subsidies on shipping before the First World War. At the end of one of these meetings, the professor unexpectedly offers him a few hours of teaching and tutoring for undergraduates in a preliminary economic history course. "I like the way you express your thoughts," Professor Pickering says. "You clearly say what you think and are skillful in choosing your arguments. Perhaps business has benefited you and taught you how to get the most out of your mind. Our students will like that. Give them lots of economics and tell them how it happens in the real world. There are gaps in your historical knowledge, but you should have no trouble tightening up the details." The income, however small, helps Jack immensely. Teaching also entitles him to put his name on a waiting list for university housing. When he adds that he is a single parent with children who sometimes have to be cared for, he is prioritized and almost immediately assigned a small apartment on campus. It is in an enclave of faculty members, all of whom are in similar situations to him, balancing the precarious life of a temporary academic or commuter and trying to create a stable family home. There's friendly company to keep him from falling into depression, vital conversations with intelligent people, and plenty of women around. His only reason for coming home is to be with his children, and he immediately starts planning how to move them into his new apartment. Of course, Caroline strongly objects. "You can't take the kids away from me. No, it would be good for them to be away from here, and you'd be depriving them of a good time. There's plenty to do here, and kids their age can play with them. I'll talk to them and see what they think." "You're trying to turn my children away from me." "I'm not trying to do anything but live my life, and I suggest you do the same." Caroline's resistance is undermined by her own desire. Something is going on, unclear but undoubtedly related to Damien, and she wants him to watch the children. He agrees to take them. At the weekly faculty meeting, he meets many of his new colleagues for the first time. There are several dozen faculty members, mostly women teaching literature, with brews of herbal tea in front of them, a few dour male philosophers, and a mixed group of historians and classicists. Among the historians, Jack is the only economics major other than his professor. He says little at first, watching his colleagues socialize, surprised at their personal attacks and open defense of their subject interests. This is not business as he understands it, and he wonders how these people work together to prepare the course. The literature professor presiding over the meeting seems to ignore most of the people who want to speak. She has not introduced Jack, and he notices one or two people eyeing him with curiosity and, it seems to him, hostility. He decides he is not to be intimidated. He is surprised when, 10 minutes into the meeting, Professor Pickering introduces him and tells him that the current program of introductory history courses taught to first-year humanities students lacks an economic perspective. We should take the opportunity of Jack's presence to add a little economics to courses on 19th century imperialism and also to a course on the rise of fascism. Obviously, this topic has been discussed before and, like everything else, is stirring up a storm of emotion. "It's not on the agenda," snorted one of the female post-structuralists. "Won't you ever stop trying to change everyone else's mind?" "Who cares what literature thinks?" opined a male philosopher. "We agreed a long time ago that these courses are already overloaded as it is," says the department chair. "Professor Pickering, you continue to appoint men despite the university's policy of achieving gender parity among academic staff," says a slender, purple-haired young woman across from Jack. She looks serious and very intelligent. 70% of the faculty are women, the professor replies. I do my part for gender equality. But the university as a whole is only 40% female and only 20% of the faculty. It's a non-professorial appointment in this department. We don't need economics. We need more about the female experience, says an elderly classics major. Our students have been asking for more economics, Professor Pickering remarks reasonably. And economic issues are particularly relevant to the female experience. Isn't that right, Jack? There's an opportunity to cover economics without pay and also to include a case study on the impact of the Great Depression on domestic workers, Jack says, a little nervous in this bear pit and feeling all eyes on him. He catches a glance from the woman across the room, and she looks amused and ready to chide him. If it reduces the ridiculous emphasis on foreign and defense policy, I'm all for it, she says. Even though it will unfortunately affect the equality and diversity policy at this unrepresentative university. Thank you, Hazel, for your enthusiastic endorsement, says Professor Pickering. So, Dr. Kirk, do the men agree? The chairman asks sardonically. We must take a vote, someone shouts. There is nothing to vote on, says the chairman. I hear no alternative motions, so we're in agreement. Just what we need, a white male banker to save the faculty from bankruptcy, says the woman next to Jack, gets up and walks away with a theatrical stride. Shortly thereafter, the meeting breaks up and Jack learns from his professor that he has been given 10 extra hours of teaching time per week after half a semester plus time for grading. He can't believe it. Things are looking up. He begins to feel at home when he starts running again. The university campus is set in a spacious and attractive park that slopes down to the river, with woods and arable fields stretching beyond. He goes outside at lunchtime, when the sun is high, and follows a short route he has mapped out that takes him along paths where he can run on soft surfaces. He is so gripped by the experience and excited about his new surroundings that he continues on to the second lap, leaving himself plenty of time to shower and change for the afternoon workshop. He hasn't felt this good in a long time. The next day he runs in overcast weather and concentrates on speed, wanting to make up for his recent neglect of his physical fitness and believing that by setting physical goals, he will help his mental recovery. He has crossed the river feeling strong and fit, only a little sore Achilles left over from the previous day, and is already racing up the slope through the woods when he sees a runner ahead of him, a slender woman. They emerge into a rugged barley field, and he sees that she is dressed in lycra tights and a tank top, her hair pulled back with a sweatband. He realizes that his silent presence in the empty countryside might be bothering her, but he can't think of what to do about it. He moves closer and realizes that the woman has sped up. She doesn't want him to pass, but he closes the road anyway. As he approaches her, he lets her pass across the full width of the path, and as he overtakes her, he says, "Hey, great place to run." She turns her head with a focused face, and he sees that it's Dr. Hazel Kirk from the literature department, the woman who sat across from him at the faculty meeting. He smiles, jumps out of her way, and maintains a tremendous speed all the way home. After a while, he meets her coming up the steps of the humanities building. "Show off," she snaps back. He can't tell if she's joking and tries to speak in a light, self-deprecating tone. Energy must be burned, since there's so much mental work to be done. Well, don't feel you have to impress me. I shouldn't. I've been doing my best to stay out of your way. Then you haven't succeeded. No, you didn't succeed in getting ahead of me. They smile fiercely and part ways. She looks good with her hair pinned back and paint from running down her cheeks. The next day he sees her alone in a coffee bar, flipping through a stack of essays. He takes his coffee and sits down across from her. "Tell me you don't mind if I sit here." She shrugs. "Why should I mind? I'm busy." "I'm lonely. I don't know anyone here. We work in different departments, but are we allowed to be friends?" She looks up sharply and they stare at each other. Finally, she says, "You don't need to ask permission. I'm basically happy to talk to anyone." "You're angry. Why?" Stunned, he looks at her more closely. Could she really look right into his heart? "You don't like me?" Why answer a question with a question? I don't know you, but I'm interested in the answer to my question. I suppose you are flawed and lonely, and that's interesting. I'll buy you a drink one night and you'll tell me all about yourself. Then I'll decide if we can be friends. In the meantime, I have work to do. Thanks for supporting me at the faculty meeting. I didn't support you. I would have voted for more feminist literary theory, but we don't have the staff to teach it. You're lucky, especially for a banker. Thanks anyway. And I'm not a banker now. They meet the next night at one of the campus bars. It's a shock for Jack to find himself back among the rowdy students, and he looks around, carefree and amused, reminiscing about his college youth. Hazel insists on buying drinks. He asks for a pint of locally produced cask ale and notices that she is drinking water, a pint of tap water. Unless it's gin, he offers hopefully. She laughs. I live on my wits and treat it with respect, and I don't waste money. There's not much of it around here. My treat for the next one. I'll have just this one. Reasonable. Don't overdo it. Tomorrow then. Beer makes me better. They talk about faculty business, about colleagues, though Hazel makes it clear she doesn't gossip, about running and why he thinks beer is good for him. He talks about how it makes him less shy and more open to expressing himself. She tells him that he needs to find the courage to be himself without stimulants. Maybe it's you who's afraid of losing control of yourself, he replies, nudging her half-empty glass of water. Gin can work wonders. So we're friends now? She nods cautiously. You're not so scary now that I know you a little. We could run around together. So you could outrun me? Keep up with you. You'd be better off running with me. They agree to run when they're both free on their lunch break, and they run a couple times a week. He does a lap with Hazel and then one for speed. He doesn't have as many classes as she does. Despite her demand that he answer questions, they are both reticent to talk about their personal lives. But then Ben and Amy come to visit for half a semester. He's walking across campus with a baby in his arms, and then they meet Hazel coming out of a bookstore. What are those? Bodyguards? She asks. I'd like you to meet my children. Ben, Amy, this is Hazel, my colleague from the humanities department. She's a feminist. What's a feminist? Both kids ask at once. Someone who believes that women and girls should have an equal chance in life and not be discriminated against because of their gender, says Hazel. And that the world is in the grip of a patriarchal oligarchy, mostly evil bankers bent on destroying civilization, Jack adds. A baleful look is thrown at him. His children are used to him saying incomprehensible things, and in any case, they are more interested in Hazel asking them questions about themselves. Today is reading week in some courses, and there's more free time. Jack tells Hazel he won't be running and invites her to an afternoon picnic by the river. She resists, but gracefully gives in when he insists, and it becomes clear that the children would like her to come. It's a carefully planned ambush by Jack. The kids are laden with water and orange juice. He brings vegetarian sushi, white wine, and fruit salad. He even brings a mat, remembering that women, if invited to sit on the grass, always say it's wet, even if it hasn't rained in months. The kids love the river, and he has to constantly keep his cool as they run along the bank, finding branches to throw into the water and chasing them as they swim downstream. Hazel arrives with homemade pizza and a flask of soup and impresses him with her competence in dealing with two shy children. She chats easily with them and even coaxes them to try the soup. He notices how she skillfully questions them to find out details of the life he's been hiding. Who their mother is, what she does, why she's not home. Shy Amy snuggles up to him and tells him that her dad doesn't live at home anymore and that she misses him because there's no one to read her a story. Ben explains that his mom is always late picking him up from football practice, and it's not fair. Hazel agrees to a glass of wine, and Jack begins to think he did the right thing. When they have eaten, she goes for a short walk with the children, showing them rabbit passages where the long grass has been mown down and gaps in the hedge leading to hidden entrances to burrows. They then look at scratch marks and water vole burrows on the riverbank. Ben sits down next to Hazel. Daddy said you're a teacher. What do you teach? Literature. It's the study of books and what people have written. What kind of books do you teach? All the books. What's your favorite? On Defending Women's Rights by Mary Wollstonecraft. Would I like it?
This it?
I recommend you read it before you get older, but you might leave it for a while. I'll see if she's written anything about men, and I'll read it. Later, when she and Jack are alone, she says, "So you're married, and you didn't tell me about it. That was very forgetful of you. Married for now. I didn't think that was relevant to the kind of conversation you wanted to have. As you see, we live apart. And you?" She looked at him intently and shook her head. Why do you ask? Because all women of a certain age must have a partner? He laughed. I meant nothing of the sort, as you well know, though you are suspiciously good with children. I have a younger brother, sisters, nephews, and nieces, and a practiced line of questioning. Yeah, kids love it when you take an interest in their lives. Commendable. But getting information from you is like trying to squeeze a diamond. What don't you know and think you should know? He ponders carefully. Whether you want a closer relationship with me and are free to pursue it. She too thinks for a moment before answering. I don't believe in relationships based on dependency. I've always had to move for my studies and career, to the west and east coasts of the US, to Spain. No relationship survives distance, and I see no reason to jeopardize my career for the sake of a relationship. It's not easy to be detached and self-sufficient when you have kids, he replies. A lot of single moms manage to do that. Either way, kids are dependent and require commitment. It's easier for two adults to give them, and to do that they need to commit to each other. Why do you say that? It sounds like you and your wife are separately meeting the children's needs, even though you are not committed to her. And the children suffer, but you are winning. I don't want more commitment. Commitment is bad because it means you're not self-sufficient and others can let you down. He looks away from her searching gaze. He doesn't like this conversation. He doesn't feel like explaining to Hazel why he is no longer committed to Caroline. His failed marriage is a humiliation to him, not an appropriate topic of conversation. And he's annoyed with himself because what he really would like is some sympathy for his misfortune and for her to show him that he's important to her. It's pathetic. Besides, he's having trouble figuring out what he wants from Hazel. She's not easy in any sense of the word, and yet he looks forward to her company. Is it because he's lonely, or because he needs a relationship to prove he's not a loser? He even wonders if he's instinctively looking for a partner to help him with the kids. His rational mind warns him that the last thing he needs is to get attached to a woman again. He and Hazel are both very busy, but they cook for each other once a week and run together at lunch when they can. They chat mostly about teaching, faculty, research, and administration. She asks about his children, but he rarely manages to get her to talk about herself. He knows that she grew up and went to school in Bristol, that her parents live in Bath, and that she studied at Cambridge University and then did her PhD on. William Godwin, Mary Wollstonecraft, and Mary Shelley in the department at Brighton. Her supervisor was a bearded sorcerer, now dean. Academia is a world of incest. He cannot learn anything about her social life before he arrives. From conversations with faculty colleagues, it appears that she has always been ambitious, hardworking, and enjoys doing the administrative work that others avoid: admissions officer, course director, or Senate representative. This is her first full-time teaching job. He knows that a tough, career-oriented woman like Caroline is the last person he should be clinging to. Easy to say, but not so easy to arrange. Next chapter. Caroline was determined to work on her relationship with Jack. She was far from the ideal, which she told herself was to maintain a balance between her two lives. Jack had veered wildly off-center, and she had to bring him back. She avoided excessive familiarity, but dressed carefully for his return on weekends, smiled welcomingly, and tried to touch him as often as she could, his hand, arm, and shoulder. But no kisses or hugs that he could use to push her away. "It's so good to be together again," she told him. "We know each other so well. We have so much to talk about, and I worry that we're drifting apart. We both have to do our best to make sure that doesn't happen. I'll arrange things so that we spend as much time together as we want. I've done everything I can to protect what we have." "Damien won't get anything this weekend?" "Not this weekend. I'll be honest. Damien knows we go out when you're busy, and he won't miss it. Our life can be the same as it was before." "Are you going to have an affair?" "Not an affair. I'm in love with Damien. I'm not being dishonest with you, but it's not about you and me. You weren't dishonest all those months you didn't tell me, when you were having fun with Damien to see if it was serious, and I went to work thinking I had a loving wife who stayed up late too often working." She was quiet for a moment, but finally said, "You have a deft way with words. You can always make me look wrong. But Damien and I love each other very much, and you can't twist things to make it look bad. I wish I could find a way to show you what a good man he is. You wouldn't be jealous if you saw what makes me love him." She started to cry, another novelty, but not necessarily off script. Wiping her eyes with a tissue, she said, "I didn't want to talk about Damien and me. I know it's painful for you. I wanted it to be about us. I love you, you know that, and you know how much I care about you. There's no point in punishing me. Maybe what happened seems unfair to you. This isn't what you signed up for when you married me. But neither did I. Surprises happen. I'm as surprised as you are, and I need your help. Damien is a special person, and I can't act like we've never met. He's a part of my life, and we have to figure out how to deal with the fallout." "And what are you suggesting? That you be my wife 4 days a week and Damien the other 3? Or the other way around? You've been with me a long time, so Damien has a lot of catching up to do. I'll give him an extra day." She shook her head, tears coming to her eyes, and he went to make coffee. When he returned, he saw that Caroline wanted to try something different too. She sat down next to him on the couch. "Honey, things aren't going right. We need to work on understanding each other. Stay with me for a while. We need a better plan." "You're working on it. You and your sweetheart. I'm sure you'll come up with another plan, like the one where you tell me I'm displaced." "No, Jack, that was never true. Our marriage is worth fighting for, but you act like you don't care. That makes me very sad. I'm sure if you think about it, you'll admit that you could have done more to keep me from falling in love with another man. We need to be together more." "You mean if I hadn't gone mountain climbing when you forbade me to do it, when I needed to work, and you were stressed out when I refused to do what you wanted? I mean, if none of that had happened, you wouldn't need a lover?" "Fine. I get it." She blushed. "I told you it wasn't planned. I wasn't looking for a lover." 3 months before, there had been a huge problem between them. For months, he'd been asking her where she'd like to go on vacation, and she hadn't wanted to agree to anything. Now he knew it was because of Damien, but at the time he thought it was because she didn't like the places he wanted to visit. He finally gave in and booked a vacation to do what he wanted to do alone. She'd been furious, complaining about childcare, but he'd gone anyway, walking and climbing around northern Greece. She was quiet for a moment, then brightened and looked at him again. "I understand the pain this has caused you. It's your foolish vanity. I can't say no to Damien because I love him, and it's part of my expression of my feelings. It's like having a nice dinner with someone. You dress up to give the event a special charm, to savor the moment. And you can enjoy a business dinner as well as a dinner with a loved one. I love Damien. I adore him because I adore him. I want to be perfect for him, but only because I love him so much." Now she was pleading with him, begging him to give her a chance to explain, to confess her love and gain his approval. "Please listen to what I have to say. I love you too. I love you. Just as much as I used to. I have a tremendous capacity to love, far more than most people. Damien won't change anything in our lives. I am your wife, I share your life, and I love you. I know you better than anyone else, and I know we need each other. Damien will never stand in the way of that. I'll take care of it. Now I want you to go to bed. I hate it when you sleep away from me. You can't get comfortable on the couch, and it just makes me feel bad. You're probably right. I'm a limited lover in every sense. Little capacity for love, limited in bed, and I make you feel bad. I realize that now. Strangely, I can't sleep next to a wife who dreams of her lover. Please, this is important. I want to be with you, to show you my love. Why? Do you imagine I want to sleep with you? Don't you know me at all? Do you think I want to sleep with a woman who just had fun with another man? If I liked that, I'd find myself a whore. She shuddered. That's a terrible thing to say. Terrible. Anyway, I appreciate your candor. Be grateful for mine. Do I have to apologize again? I wanted to act in good faith. Sex shouldn't get in the way of anything. Don't worry, it won't get in the way. It won't happen between us. Ever. Their gazes met, and he noted with satisfaction that he'd finally broken through her nonsense. She set aside her wineglass and stood up. How can you ruin everything when I've put so much effort into this? You're right. I am such an asshole. But don't worry about me. I've made a lot of friends at the university, and special ones at that. I won't suffer. He said it to thank Damien, but in the same instant, he realized it was true. Hazel was special. Just thinking about her made him feel better. This isn't what I wanted. You'll get over it. I've already gotten over it. I don't even think about Damien lately. She ran out of the room and he ran again, ran like he'd never run before, dead, bloodless, inspired. Another weekend, she came to him agitated and angry. My father called and said they called while you were here. Did you talk to them? He nodded. Did you tell George they couldn't come tomorrow? We can't let my parents upset the situation, especially now that we've gotten to live together so much better than we used to. Of course I said they could come. I like your parents. They're a lot of fun and I don't want them to be disappointed. You've already told them they can stay, and I see no reason to refuse the invitation. She was furious. Don't be stupid. That was before you went to Brighton. You know why they can't come. I suppose you intend to carry on this farce of sleeping on the sofa, and what will they think? He shrugged his shoulders. Are you afraid of the truth? They're adults now. Let them draw their own conclusions. Or you can explain sleep to them. Find out if your mom thinks your two men in a marriage scheme is very sensible. I'm sure they'll understand. Or are you afraid George will think his dear daughter is misbehaving? She gloomed. That's a very selfish attitude, and I think you're trying to punish me. If you don't do what is necessary, I'll put them off. But why should they suffer? You're right. It's not fair. Maybe you should tell Damien that this was all a mistake, that Mom and Dad won't approve. And for other reasons, it would be nice if you shared my bed. She added. Doesn't Damien give you enough? Don't be rude. I'm thinking of you. It's not good to be without you. How do you know what I'll get? She looked at him intently. I figure that since you refuse to be with me, you get nothing. If you're sleeping with me, I think you should tell me. He smiled back at her. You mean in case I pass some nasty disease on to you? But don't worry. I won't wait more than 3 months before I tell you about my cheating. Isn't that what you did to me? I don't sleep around, she muttered. I'm only with Damien, and we love each other. You're not risking anything with me. Strange, but it's a matter of whether I accept your word or Damien's. Are you sure he doesn't have a string of malleable mistresses, like a man with a long track record of pursuing married women? She slammed the door shut and went to bed. For the first time in a long time, Jack thought he had won an important victory. But the next morning she came into the living room and repented. I'm sorry about last night. I just don't want to upset my parents. They're very old-fashioned and traditional and wouldn't understand if they found you banishing me and sleeping on the couch. They'll definitely understand. And actually, you're not worried about them being upset. You're worried about them being upset with you. And if they get upset, isn't it because you did something that you know will upset them? Tell them the truth. Tell them that you cheated, that you have a lover, and that we broke up. They'll do much better with the truth than they will with your lies. She was puzzled. But we didn't break up. Why do you say that? It's just that you have to work outside the house during the week. That's what I told them. We don't live as husband and wife, so we're separated. We're doing fine. Don't you dare say anything so bad to my parents. Anyway, I've made arrangements with Damien for when they want to come over, so it's not very convenient. They'll have to cancel. Not a problem. I told Stella I'd keep an eye on them if you're busy. She said they're looking forward to coming. You bastard. Tears stood in her eyes. You're doing this to ruin my mood. I'm meeting Damien tomorrow, as you've probably already guessed. It's his birthday, and we've been planning to go to the theater and have dinner for a long time. That's why I didn't want my parents to come this weekend. Please, instead of making my life harder, just mind your own business and stop making everyone miserable. He shrugged, resenting her demeanor. I like your parents. They're decent people and the kids look forward to meeting them. I'll tell them I'll meet them and the kids in town for lunch. So it's my business, not yours. Then they will go shopping. Take Damien with you if you want to when you're done having fun. Introduce him to your parents and make him a full member of the family. If he's so much in love with you, he must be dying to meet your parents. She looked not only tired but angry and answered nothing. This time, he slept soundly on his narrow couch. Caroline used the time the children stayed with Jack to repair her relationship with Damien. After work, she would go to his house and stay the night. They would cook and eat together while listening to music. It was a beautiful arrangement, but it soon became clear to Caroline that Damien didn't want to do it more than 2 nights a week. It wasn't that he had other things to do, it was just that he enjoyed his own company and got bored if she was around too often. That was why he remained a bachelor, she supposed. He just didn't like getting married. It's all right, she reassured herself. This is what I wanted. I don't want to marry Damien, which means we still have a chance to reunite with Jack. When our new life works out, he'll be grateful that I spend little time with my lover. But for now, she was left to shorten her evenings and nights alone at home, which were just miserable. No matter how much she put off leaving work, she was left with nothing but a cold house, no one to cook for, and an empty bed. It made the evenings with Damien all the more precious. When Sunday came, and she hadn't spoken to anyone all day, she hustled around the house, tidying up the kitchen, watching shows on TV and thinking about dinner. Her excitement grew when it was time for the family to arrive. Jack had promised to be home for dinner, but they arrived at 7 o'clock, road-weary and hungry. She hugged and kissed her children, smiled at Jack, and touched his arm. It's so good to see you, Jack. I hope the kids were well behaved and you enjoyed your time. He nodded, pulling away. And you did too. I know it's hard to handle the kids alone, and you should be grateful for the break. Dinner's ready. I love it when you all come home. I want you to always be here. It's such a pleasure to cook for you, Jack. You always appreciate your food. He sat down with them and ate a little, but he didn't pretend to like the food. She made stew because it was cheaper than buying a piece of beef. The kids liked it, but it was quite different from the usual Sunday roast. She thought about buying wine, but decided it was better to let Jack see her poverty. If he wanted wine, he could bring some. The conversation was mostly with the children. They told her about the picnic with Jack's friend Hazel and how Hazel could make a delicious pizza with tomatoes, olives, and herbs, but no cheese because she was a vegetarian. Caroline couldn't believe the effect this conversation had on her. It was as if she had been replaced into the role of wife and mother without any discussion. I can make pizza too. I'm just too busy, and mine will have cheese in it. Don't pretend you don't like cheese. Hazel's is delicious anyway. She doesn't eat cheese because male dairy calves are killed at birth. I think that's disgusting. But I'll eat cheese because I like it, and when I grow up, I'll stop killing calves. It's stupid to get carried away with food. You have to eat what's put in front of you, Caroline said. I don't think Hazel can know much about raising children. She's fun, Daddy likes her, and I like her, Ben said. But she's useless at football. And she's my friend because she's good to Daddy, Amy said. He takes her for a run and she makes him laugh, and she helps me with my art project for school. I'd help if you just asked, Caroline said. And I've always been able to make Jack laugh, make him angry that I can't. Next chapter. Time passes quickly when they're together, and Jack can't say no to Hazel if she calls and suggests lunch. And she apparently likes him. She calls often, and she lets him hold her hand and kiss her when they meet. But once, when he put his arm around her waist and pulled her tightly against him, she pushed him away. You're trying to strangle me, she said. He objected, but she disagreed. She's difficult to deal with, and he's not sure he has the strength to open the door to her heart. He thinks she doesn't understand her feelings for him, and wonders if she has never been in love. He buys her flowers and she tells him, I don't accept gifts. Exchanges are fine. You buy me coffee, I buy you coffee. But unsolicited gifts I send back unopened. If you accept them, you always end up paying more than they're worth. You mean I buy you a rubber band full of daffodils and expect entertainment in return? Exactly. Only I've done better than daffodils. They're roses. And I don't expect anything, at least not for roses. You have strange ideas about men. But seriously, I mean to say that you've been great with my children. You gave them a lot. Not only by taking an interest in them, but by showing them that their father is not alone and unhappy. That's very important to them, and I wanted to thank you. I enjoyed meeting them too, so I got my reward. I don't need flowers, or a sense of some vague obligation to you. What if I don't demand a kiss in exchange for flowers, but just accept it like a caveman? He asks, and immediately does as he's bid, kissing her on the lips. Now you'll have to do the same to me so you won't be in debt. He is relieved when she laughs and does as he suggests. He finds an empty juice bottle and defiantly places his roses in the bottle in the center of her desk. She smiles. Soon afterward, they both have to go to work. He to the library, she to lecture. The kids come over for the weekend. He knows Hazel loves children's company, and she takes them on a trip down the coast to Wittering, where there are sandy beaches. He drives across campus to her little terraced house on the streets behind University Park. He's in a goofy mood, and when Hazel opens the door, he says to his kids, Say hi to Daddy's personal trainer. She takes me jogging and keeps me on a strict diet. No burgers, Ben says. Hi, Hazel. Hazel doesn't say anything, and Amy looks alarmed. We're here to demand our kisses in exchange for my roses, Jack adds, looking up for something lighthearted. Hazel says nothing, and he suddenly realizes that she is paler than he has ever seen her, and trembling. He rushes forward and takes her hand. What is the matter? Are you unwell? She shakes her head at a loss for words. She's cold, and when he puts his arm around her, she collapses, barely able to stay on her feet. Hazel, what happened? She's breathing hard, her face wet. My mom called. She sobs, gulping air with her mouth between words. My daddy died. He had a stroke. He hugs her tightly and kisses her forehead. You poor thing. I'm so sorry. He invites his children into the house and pulls Hazel into the hallway. Her arms wrap around his waist, she pulls him against her, and he feels her quiet sobs from deep in his chest. His children stand at the end of the hallway watching him with round eyes and fear. He has to do something and lifts Hazel to her feet, carrying her into the living room. Come on, help me make Hazel comfortable. He sets her down on the couch and she's still clinging to him. He has to get her to talk. When did your mom call? I don't know. A few minutes ago. I want you to be quiet for a while and then we'll decide what to do. I'm going to make some tea. Sit with me. Ben and Amy will sit with you. I'm making tea. He goes into the kitchen, puts the kettle on, finds green tea in a teapot with a tulip-shaped teacup. Looking into the living room, he sees that his children are sitting on either side of her on the couch, and Ben is telling her something about school. She hugs them. He hesitates while he makes tea, and holding out a cup to her, he says, "You'll have to go to your mom's?" She nods. "But I have class tomorrow. I have to go out to work." "I'll call the department and they'll set something up for you, and you won't be able to drive yourself. You're still shaking. I'll drive you to your mom's. Then I'll take the kids to mommy's." "Sorry, kids, no C today." "I can't ask you to do all that," Hazel says and starts to cry. "It's not that important, and you didn't ask me to. I'm just trying to help. Now I'm going to call the office and tell them you're not coming in tomorrow. They'll understand." "Thanks." He calls, and when he returns, Hazel has already finished her tea and perked up. She tries her best to smile at the children. "I'm sorry about the C," she says, looking at Jack. "I'll get over it now." "You have to do what my daddy says," Ben tells her. "He always knows what to do." "I will." Hazel drinks more tea while Jack gathers what she needs. It's a 3-hour drive on busy roads. When they arrive, they catch Hazel's sisters with her mother, a short, round woman with gray hair who greets Jack politely, but doesn't seem to know his name. Her sisters, who squint at Hazel every now and then examine him and his children with insolent curiosity, are quite another matter. "So this is your boyfriend," says the youngest, Mimi, kissing Jack. "Mine. He's tall and dark and handsome." And to Jack, she adds, "I thought we'd never be introduced." Hazel usually hides her boyfriends in the closet or under the bed. Hazel doesn't dispute this description, and a few moments later, all eyes are on the children, who timidly keep to themselves until they are drawn in, stroked, questioned, given drinks, and led into the living room where they settle down to watch a DVD. "I don't know where you're all going to sleep," Mom says, as she enters and looks around at the sleepy children. "Jack will sleep with Hazel, and the kids can go to Daddy's office," says Big Sister Clementine. "I'll manage anywhere. On the floor if I have to," Jack says, throwing a glance at Hazel. "Hey, She says nothing and leaves with her mother to go into the kitchen with her to make dinner. Jack stays with his little sister and takes the opportunity to learn everything he can from Mimi about Hazel's family life. It turns out that she has been a smart girl since she started school, winning all the prizes, including a scholarship to Cambridge, and no layman can explain what her academic subject is. Mimi, for her part, demands to be told all about Jack and notices that the men Hazel meets disappear by the time she sees her sister again. "How often do you meet?" he asks Riley. "At least once a year. She gives the impression of being a lover of mischief." "I haven't noticed, but she's hard to recognize." "Hazel doesn't buy us sweets because they're bad for us, or chocolate because it's made with slave labor," Ben adds. "But she's very nice." "She said she never had dolls when she was my age," Amy says. "She's a liar. She had dolls, but she got rid of them," says Mimi. "I still have one of her dolls. I had to buy it from her because she said she was going to bury it in the garden in protest. I'll show you." Jack goes into the kitchen where Hazel's mother offers him coffee and cookies. Hazel is peeling potatoes and they are both crying. He asks if he can help, but is told to leave. He returns to the living room and sits down with Clementine, who is also talking about Hazel. She wants to know about her work, and Jack explains her fiery feminism, shocking speeches at faculty council meetings, concern for students, and scathing deconstruction of literary texts. At dinner, he has to talk about himself and his family, and the kids join in the conversation. There is a somber emptiness at the end of the table where the father sat, and a willingness to laugh at anything. Of course, he doesn't say anything about Damien, and the kids can't ask why he left their mother. He talks about his old job and how glad he is to have left it. Later, he chats with Hazel and tells her that he can't take advantage of the situation to be in her bed. "Don't be a fool," she says. "We're both adults. We both need a good night's sleep. Now he busies himself with bathing the kids and putting them to bed. Mimi puts up her hand and picks up some books from her childhood to read to them. She looks a lot like Hazel, only softer and gentler. He realizes he admires and responds to Hazel's cuteness. He wants a woman who is mentally stable and gives as much as she receives without complaining. She may be hard to recognize, but if she thinks something is important, she's sure to say so. Everyone has a drink before bed. Hazel only has tonic water. Everyone is immersed in themselves, all thinking about their loss. And Jack sips his scotch, wishing he had met Hazel's father. Dutch courage, he remarks, hoping to lighten the mood, and sips his drink when it's time to go to bed. Everyone giggles and Hazel slaps him in the face. He wishes her good night and takes her hand, leading her upstairs. He gets into bed first. She rummages around in bed, changes clothes in the adjoining bathroom, and returns wearing a t-shirt that says, "Faculty Whore." Ironic? He asks. How would you know? She turns off the light and hugs him. The next morning, the kids run into the house and ask if there will be breakfast. Left alone, Jack tells Hazel. I have to divorce Caroline and settle this situation. I'm not the marrying kind, Hazel warns. Maybe not, but you're mine, and I'm a one-woman man. It's time to get the kids home. A few days later, Jack heads out for coffee at the end of a difficult seminar on labor unrest in England before World War I. When he was a student, he argued vigorously about the merits of organized labor, unions, socialism, and communism. But now the young don't seem to care. It depresses him, and he thinks of ways to make the subject interesting. The weather is warm. He takes his coffee outside and sits on the edge of the fountain that takes center stage on the concrete piazza. He tries to relax and create the right mindset for the rest of the day's library work. A student from a seminar comes up to him and asks about the reading list, and he chats with her, realizing that she's doing her best to flirt with him. He concentrates on coming up with alternatives to the books she can't find, and eventually she leaves him alone. He closes his eyes, trying to free his thoughts, raises his head, and sees a vaguely familiar man walking towards him. One of the faculty? He doesn't think so. The man is standing right in front of him. Look here, I want to talk to you. Jack says nothing. The man is dressed in a gray suit, has curly gray hair, a little long, and he's looking right at him, accusing him. Not the faculty. It's the embodiment of his nightmare, Damien Curd. Jack remains seated, motionless and tense, waiting curiously to see what will happen. He has tried his best to avoid this encounter, but he is not sorry it happened. He stares intently at Damien, and even though his opponent is 50 pounds heavier and more threatening, he knows he's not going to back down. This is his land, and he will not be defeated. Damien's voice is thin with tension, and he can hear a hint of spittle in it. He has already prepared himself for this confrontation. I suppose this was your pathetic revenge. You ruined my life and admitted to sending that damn letter. It's obvious, but you have to admit it. You have to sign this statement. What you did was criminal, but if you admit it, I'll let the matter rest. Damien shoves Jack close, pushing the piece of paper forward, eyes bulging, lips tight, saliva on his chin. Go home. Jack doesn't know where that voice is coming from. He experiences a rush of adrenaline along with it. He stands up so that they are face to face and looks directly into the bloodshot eyes. It's hard to believe that this completely unremarkable man has undermined and destroyed everything he's built his entire life. He is protecting not only himself, but his new life, his children, all of civilization. I don't have to do anything. You're the one who ruined everything. Now get out. I talked to the police about the burglary of my house. I gave them your name, and eventually they'll get you. You better sign this statement. Crawl back into your hole and don't come out again. If you hang around here and cause trouble, I'll gladly kill you. No one will miss you. You're a loser. Just sign it. Jack sipped his coffee so that drops splattered Damien's shirt and fell on his polished patent shoes. He thinks he'll lose if Damien fights, but so be it. Damien is sweating. Not the same cold, controlling counselor at all. This is not the time for who struck first? Duels. There are plenty of people around, but no one seems to be looking. Jack grabs Damien by the lapel and pulls him toward him. Get out of here before I throw you out! Damien turns around and lunges. The haymaker's blow flies past Jack's cheek and he bounces to the side. Jack nudges him so that he trips over the curb and falls, splashing water. A dozen people are watching. They don't look surprised and clap their hands tiredly as if they've seen it all before. Damien rushes toward the fountain, but Jack steps aside. It takes him some effort of will, but he moves on without looking back. The paper he was told to sign is picked up by a breeze and fluttered across the piazza, but he keeps walking. He expects to be chased, but he reaches the library and passes through the gate using his security card. A shiver begins to hit him, and he sits down on the nearest seat, picking up a newspaper. He feels good about himself. He feels like screaming at the top of his voice and beating the air with his fists. This feeling lasts until the evening, when he arranges to meet Hazel at the bar for a drink at the end of her late lecture. When he arrives, she's already sitting there with a few students and casts him a sullen look, as if annoyed at being disturbed. He politely asks if anyone would like a drink and goes to the bar to get one for himself. When he returns, the students have already left, and he leans in to kiss Hazel. She wastes no time and doesn't spare his feelings. Are you trying to shame me? I trusted you, and now I find out you're just a street thug. How could you? Stunned, Jack sits up. Wait a minute, Hazel. I take it this is about my meeting with Caroline's lover. What do you think happened? This is between him and me. The bastard attacked me, and I defended myself. I was too restrained compared to what I could have done. A fight in public? This is a university. We pride ourselves on training minds to solve the world's problems. How can fighting help you? I hate what you did. There's always another way out. I should have let him hit me? You should have walked away. I did as soon as I could. Fighting in front of everyone in the university square. You're getting a bad reputation. I feel humiliated just knowing you. I hate that kind of thing. I haven't done anything to you. That goes against everything I stand for. What chance do women have if men assert themselves with their fists? Equality requires living by civilized rules and respecting each other. I didn't hit a woman. You're the one who said no one belongs to anyone. I take responsibility for my act, but you had nothing to do with it. And if it happened again, I would do the same thing. I'm not a pacifist. I believe that what you believe in should be fought for. You just don't have to fight with your fists in most cases. I'd say you think the same way, and that a man's physical strength can be used to defend equality as much as it is a threat. You don't know me at all. I believe in living by principles. I don't want to know a man who uses his fists to ease his feelings. She stands up. Don't bother cooking dinner for me. She leaves the bar, leaving Jack alone with his drink and feeling like he's been flattened by an avalanche. His emotional state doesn't improve when a couple of drunken rugby players lean over to him and encourage him. Well done, mate. We saw you drop that dumbass in the fountain. Ace. Everyone seems to be looking at him. Everyone has witnessed the fight. He ponders what to do about Hazel, but is so upset at the thought of losing her, so humiliated by her appraisal, that he leaves the beer, goes back to his apartment, changes his clothes, and runs to the river and through the woods after her in the thickening darkness. His past has not lost its power to pull him down and leave him lying on the ground. The next day, Hazel stays out of his way, and the giggle she greets him with at the beginning of the seminar alerts him to the problem. Eventually, one of the male students admits that he's on YouTube. Someone filmed the fight and put the footage online. He shrugs and tries his best to guffaw. And you thought I was a cute theorist. Now you know I'm a muscular economist who throws those who disagree with me into the fountain. That's why I've been successful as a banker. We knew you were a banker, so it's no surprise that you're pissing people in the street, one of them says. A half-strangled laugh breaks out, and he puts the incident out of his mind. The fight is just another consequence of Caroline's terror, and he's not about to let it drag him down. The next day in the middle of the afternoon, he gets a call from his professor asking him to go to a reception for visiting scholars at Senate House. "You're the only one of my staff I can count on to have a decent suit and tie. Put on some decent clothes and present economic history great and good. It's a chance to show off and get a free lunch." He arrives a little late, and the first person he sees in the crowded conference room is Hazel. She's wearing an exotic silk scarf, her idea of smart clothing. He recognizes no one else, and the guests are a high-ranking delegation from an Indian university. There is wine, refreshments, and a buffet. He fills his plate and, determined to prove himself, applies his business skills and starts networking. He joins a conversation between a gaunt scientist and one of the guests and adds some humor and wisdom. Then he talks to a lonely man standing alone with half-rimmed glasses who turns out to be the dean of engineering. They chat about mountaineering, an interest, it turns out, they share. Jack refills the wine and moves on to a couple of customers who are chatting with a woman in a tweed suit. One of them is an economist, and they are talking seriously about banking, the European debt crisis, and financial regulation in emerging economies. It's a lively discussion, and they exchange views. The visitors leave, and Jack is left talking to the tweedy woman. Belatedly, he realizes that she is the vice-chancellor of the university. She questions him about what he does, his research, and what he thinks of the history curriculum. He enjoys the conversation and notices that Hazel is watching him. She's still talking to her friends. She's not socializing at all. "So I'm a street thug, shaming women, huh?" He feels like shouting. The vice-chancellor smiles indulgently and walks on. He feels good about his professional life and pours himself some more food. It's Friday, and he is teaching a seminar at lunchtime and then drives home in time to pick up his children from school. He is looking forward to it, but feels he is not ready to share the weekend with Caroline. He hopes that most of the time she will be out with her lover. He and Ben are sitting in the car waiting for Amy to get out of school when Ben tells him, "Mom cried and yelled a lot this morning. I think she's really mad at me because I tore my shirt putting it on, and it was the only clean one I had. I had to wear yesterday's dirty one." "I'm sure it's just a mix-up," he assures his son. "We'll figure it out when we get home. We'll buy a few more shirts if we need to." "And I got expelled this week because I couldn't find my tie and went to school without it. I told my mom and she said it was my own fault." "Not if you made the effort to find it. We'll buy another one, and when you find the old one, you'll have a spare." "Thanks, Daddy." His daughter lifts his spirits, and they drive to the mall to buy clothes for Ben, new pens for Amy, and delay the moment they meet his wife. Nevertheless, she's waiting for them, and he can see right away that she's dressed up and made an effort. He lets the children go ahead, and preempting her greeting says, "You look very nice. Dressed up for your lover?" She blushes and reaches for him. He flinches involuntarily. "Don't come near me. I don't know who you were with." He's never said anything so blatantly insulting to Caroline before, and she takes a step back in shock and looks at him strangely. "Please, Jack, I'm sure I deserve it, but please don't. I can't take it anymore." He makes an assumption. "What's the matter, lover's bunk?" She nods and bursts into tears. "Damien found a job in London. He got so angry when his employers didn't believe him about that letter. He left and got a job with their biggest competitors. I don't think our relationship will survive the distance. They've already deteriorated anyway." Jack silently digested this information, figuring out what it meant to him, and realizing that Damien's appearance at the university was an act of desperation related to this crisis in his professional life. It was nice to think that their little spat had helped knock the bastard's hubris down a notch. "Don't be hard on me, Jack. I made a lovely dinner. Come on, let's go eat. Let's try not to hurt each other." He sees the sense in that, but adds anyway, "I'm not the person to ask for sympathy. I'm glad your lover is gone, but I'm sure you'll find another troublemaker to warm your bed." She averts her gaze. "Please, Jack, This isn't going to lead to anything good. Let's go get something to eat. There's wine this time. Jack bites his tongue, about to ask what occasion they are celebrating, and readily accepts a glass. The next day, he decides to bring groceries to help with the cleanup. Everyone is hungry and focuses on the food. Jack looks around the table, and for a moment the scene is indistinguishable from what it would have looked like a year ago. Appearances are deceiving. He eats and realizes he has to decide what happens next. He wants to talk to Caroline about the kids coming to live with him, but decides to wait until another time. After dinner, he goes with Ben to look for the tie, and they turn it into a game. Within minutes, he finds a red-striped snake at the bottom of the laundry basket in the bathroom, and Ben's mood improves dramatically. As Amy gets ready for bed, he tells her about how her week at school went, and she informs him that she's learning how to play the recorder. He promises to buy some exercise books. They start a new story she has saved to read with him, but after a while she says, "Daddy, you're falling asleep. I'm giving you Mishka to hold because last time you fell asleep on my bed, you crushed Panda and he was very offended." "I won't." He protests and very soon falls asleep. The next day they go shopping, and Jack imagines that with Damien gone, Caroline thinks things are back to the way they were before. He tells her that Ben should have a proper school uniform with everything he needs stocked up, and she whirls them around the stores, buying everything he needs. They can't find Amy's book on playing the recorder, but he tells her he'll be sure to find it in Brighton, where there's a good music store. Then they go food shopping, and he buys a huge lunch for the evening and food for dinner for every day of the week. Caroline lets him spend the money and doesn't say anything, but he can see that she is happy. There is a week left of the semester when the plan is for the kids to stay with Jack. He wonders how Caroline will feel about it. He knows she won't like being alone, and wonders if she will try to see Damien in London. He mentions his plan to take the kids, and she immediately says she'll bring them to Brighton. "It will do me good to get some sea air, and I want to see where you are staying. The children have told me so much about the university." He is surprised, but can't object to anything and wonders what she is up to. Does she imagine that if she tries hard enough, she can win him back? Even Caroline must realize that's unrealistic. But when he thinks about it, he realizes that's exactly what she thinks. Next part. The kids were excited, packing for the week, chatting and singing songs in the car on the way out of town. Caroline knew they were happy because they were going to see their father, but she was in a good mood too. It seemed like it was a holiday for all of them, and she hadn't had a chance to enjoy the company of her children in a long time. Silly. But she couldn't wait to see Jack's new home and hope that he would behave more calmly on his own turf. If they could at least be friends, she would break his bitter shell and with her best efforts, find a way to rebuild their relationship. They had always enjoyed each other's company, so why not do it again? The road was bad, they took a wrong turn, the freeway was closed due to an accident, and it was raining. By the time they found a parking spot by the university, the kids were cranky and hungry, and she was exhausted. "We need a place to sit and eat when Jack gets here," she suggested to the kids, who were already running out of the car and raring to show her around the campus. "That's where Daddy works," Amy said, standing in the piazza and proudly pointing to the concrete and glass humanities building. "Let's go to the refectory," Ben said. "Dad says they make good hamburgers there with 6 kinds of relish, and the chips aren't bad. We haven't had a chance to try the hamburgers yet." He led them to the cafeteria, which was bustling with staff and students grabbing quick bites, saying hello to friends, and stopping for business between the counters. Eventually, they found a free table, and Caroline texted Jack to let him know where to find them. She hoped he wouldn't be too long, because they were hungry, the kids kicking each other irritably under the table and looking back at the endless procession of people hoping to see Jack. "There's Hazel," Ben said suddenly, straightening up in his chair. He exclaimed, "Hello, Hazel. I bet you're eating soup, not hamburgers." She was talking to a woman with a braid in her hair, but she lifted her head and smiled, glancing apprehensively at Caroline as she approached. "Hi, Ben. Hi, Amy. I hope you're having a good day. A few more years and you'll be able to come to my lectures. Not the place to try to find peace, she added, turning to Caroline. Hazel is Daddy's girlfriend, Ben explained to his mother. Actually, no, Hazel replied. Lest it sound like an insult to Ben, she added. But I remember the great picnic we had by the river when I brought my soup and you taught me how to play football. You make sure Daddy doesn't get lonely, Amy said. No one knew what to say to that, and finally Caroline said, I should introduce myself. I'm Jack's wife, and these are my children. Do you work with him here? Not exactly. We're more like competitors, on the same faculty but with incompatible educational and teaching ambitions. He's the kind of guy who clamors for exclusive men's studies programs, where they talk about the triumphs of great men. Caroline brightened. So you're not friends then? Jack takes his subject very seriously. Jack didn't tell me he was married, and I minded my own business. I hope Ben and Amy consider me a friend. We had fun together. Please have a seat. This is a difficult conversation, but I'm worried about Jack and I don't know what's going on. If there's been a misunderstanding, I suppose it's my fault. I wouldn't want you to worry about Jack. Hazel didn't look happy, but pulled a chair over to another table and sat a little to the side, facing Caroline. What about the food? Ben asked hopefully. Now, Caroline replied, and began to tell Hazel the story of how Jack had given up his job at the bank to pursue his studies, and how she had admired and supported his ambition despite financial difficulties in traveling. Hazel looked somber, clutching her bag to her chest, and the children sat in silence watching the two women. Caroline was explaining how strong-willed and unyielding Jack could be when he finally came and stood next to the table, unsure of what to do. Daddy. Amy jumped to her feet and wrapped her arms around his waist. He leaned over and kissed her, then ruffled Ben's hair. I want to hear how the football game went. And did you play in goal? 6-0, 6-0. We defeated them, and my teacher said I kept a clean sheet. The women stared at each other, and Caroline half lifted herself to join in the kissing. Jack walked over to the other side of the table and sat in the chair between his children. Jack, it's good to see you, she said cheerfully, noticing him looking at Hazel. Hazel and I have gotten to know each other. It must be so interesting to work among all these smart people. I hope you had a good drive. The freeway can get very busy in the middle of the morning, he replied. There was silence, and he looked at each in turn. Suddenly, he stood up. I seem to have blighted the conversation. Much better if I leave you women to gossip. Children, are you coming with me? But I was promised a burger, Ben protested. I'll go with Daddy, Amy said, and took his hand as he walked away. Maybe I can have a burger some other time, Ben said, and hurried after them. Well, that was witty, Hazel said and sighed. Tell me, Caroline, why did Jack come to Brighton? Did you two break up? I mean, estranged from each other? Did Jack say that? That's not quite true. Why don't we have coffee? Next chapter. The sun comes out, and Jack leads the kids to the waterfront where they eat beef burgers and chips from an outdoor kiosk, wary of the circling seagulls. The food isn't great, but everyone is full and not complaining. He's upset about the meeting in the refectory and knows his children are upset that their day didn't live up to expectations because they like having their parents with them. Jack texts Caroline to let her know where they are, and after eating, they take a walk along the waterfront. Ben notices a crazy golf course where the ball goes over miniature bridges, through tunnels, and into the mouths of painted monsters. He is intrigued and insists they play. Jack agrees. They gather balls and clubs and wait to play the first hole. Ben takes the competition seriously, planning his strokes, but mostly going overboard. Jack has to help Amy by wrapping his arms around her shoulders and holding the club with her. After the first few failures, they have a lot of fun. Ben has to do some serious work, but on the last hole, he wins. Hot and thirsty, they look around for ice cream and find Caroline sitting on a bench watching them. You looked so happy. I needed a break, so I watched you play, she explains. Jack, I'm so sorry about what happened. It was an accident, and I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't prepare myself to meet Hazel, and I was embarrassed too. That's okay. It wasn't your fault. We had a good time without you. I'm just going to go get the kids some ice cream. They'd like to go to the beach. They sit down on the pebbles at the top of the beach. The kids take off their shoes and socks and run down to the sea. Caroline sits down next to Jack on her folded jacket and closes her eyes against the sun to watch the children splashing in the waves. You gave up on us, didn't you? She says. I suppose you want a divorce, and I feel so sorry for the children. It's obvious that Hazel is reaching for you. Jack considers his answer carefully. Perhaps a divorce is a good idea. I explained to Hazel about Damien and made it clear that I wanted to keep you. I think she had a hard time understanding my point of view. If you want to know, she's on your side. But I'm not going to let you walk away. I'm going to fight her to the bitter end. She doesn't need to know about our messy lives. I want to make sure there are no misunderstandings. I won't let you run away. Is that real? You're right, it's over between us. I'm glad you worked it out in the end. It was over between us the moment you took your mind off married life. I'll want a divorce, but that's not the priority right now. It's more important to get the kids settled. I'm trying to think straight, do the right thing, and I think it would be better for them to stay with me for a week next semester. There are good schools here and inexpensive after-school facilities on campus. In any case, my job is more flexible than yours. You want to take them away from me. This is about them, not you. Think about what's best for them. Leave me alone. You have Damien. Chase after him. Think about someone other than yourself for once. Don't make fun of me. Please, Jack, I want you to think again. My affair with Damien was going to happen. I would have been a coward to turn down his offer of love. It was my destiny and nothing good came of it, but don't punish me for trying. Now we can go back to the way things were. I've learned my lesson. So have I. I don't want to live with a woman who betrays me when it benefits her. I won't do it, not even for the kids. They deserve something better. I never betrayed you. Even now you haven't given up on Damien. You're just backing yourself up. You're still thinking about yourself, not the children, and you never thought about what your actions mean to others. What you did was careless or stupid. It doesn't matter. If I'm married, I have to respect my wife. You're good company, all the things that interested me from the beginning, but now I don't respect you. It's not about guilt. Maybe you really can't help yourself. It's just that I know it's bad with you. You can only bring me more misery if I stay with you. You should be walking around with a red flag, warning people to stay away for their own safety. She cries, and when the children hurry back, she gets up and runs down the steps to the embankment so they won't see her tears. The children don't notice anything. They are enjoying the beach and want Jack to come over and look at the dead jellyfish they found. He sets off with them. And Caroline is on her way home when they get back to campus, not waiting for Jack to look around the apartment. The next morning, Jack makes a big breakfast of bacon and eggs for Ben and Amy, and while they eat, they discuss how to spend the day. He's anxious because he wants his kids to have a good time, but he also has to work on notes for Monday's meeting with the professor about his research. They are sitting at the table finishing breakfast when the doorbell rings, and Jack is surprised to find Hazel on the doorstep. She smiles and reaches from behind her back to give him a single red rose. Isn't that what a man does to show his lover that he is repentant? Jack, this is a sign of how I feel about you, and I'm sorry. Jack takes the rose, not knowing what to do. You don't believe in gifts. I'm not in the habit of admitting mistakes or giving men roses either, but that's why I'm here. May I come in? Please tell me everything is okay and we can start over. I'm surprised, but of course you can come in. And I'm sure it's the children you want to see. Jack, I'm sorry. I made a big mistake. Now relax and let me make it right. I'm not going to hurt you. She takes his hand and kisses it, then walks into the kitchen and greets the kids. Ben is very happy to see her and lets her kiss him. I saw you kissing Daddy. You're Daddy's girl. I knew all along. You can't know that unless you've been told. Jack says, embarrassed and wary. Otherwise, it's like teasing a boy in class, saying you saw him kissing a girl, when you know they'll hate you for saying that. But we've seen you in bed together, Amy says. So Hazel must be your girlfriend. That was a mistake. Letting you kids see us was a mistake, but not being together, Hazel says. My body was the rational part of me. My mind can't be trusted. My mind is a whore and my body is holy. Amy, you have a wonderful father. Jack was there for me when I needed him, but I pushed him away when he came to me for comfort. I won't be able to forgive myself for that. Of course my dad is wonderful, Amy says judiciously. He reads fairy tales well and knows what every word means. I'm not really a child, says Jack. I met you the other day for a drink, not to console you. And you stuck to your principles, which is good. It's just that your principles don't agree. Sit down and have some breakfast. It's scrambled eggs and bacon, Amy says. You have nothing to eat but tomatoes. Fried in bacon grease, Jack warns. We didn't expect a vegetarian for breakfast, and I like my kids to eat square meals. I just want coffee. But could we sit down first? Jack sits down and she settles on his lap, wraps her arms around his neck and kisses him provocatively. You, Ben says. We'd better leave. They don't want us here, Amy says. No, both adults protest. I'll behave, says Hazel, but I had to show your dad how I feel about him. I can be an idiot sometimes, and I've been one this week. I just hope Jack can forgive me. Dad doesn't mind when I do something bad, Ben says. He always forgives me, but don't stand around when he's angry. It gets creepy when he yells. Ben! You know what I mean? Jack feels far out of place as Hazel discusses what to do for the day and blends into the family as if there was no break. He can't figure out what she's doing, but he doesn't want to distract her. Has everything suddenly gotten good? It can't be, and he's still angry at her for rejecting him. But he's glad to have her around and can't take his eyes off her. Did you change your mind when you saw I was friends with the vice chancellor? She looks at him, checking to see if he's serious. In your dreams. I'm a full-time faculty member here with doctoral students, and you're a student with a few temporary hours teaching freshmen. I'm not impressed with anyone you know, especially if it involves sucking up to the boss. But your costume is a knockout. They have a friendly bicker and both begin to relax. Jack imagines putting Hazel to bed and is amazed to notice how contented his children have suddenly become. Maybe it's because they have some instinct to recognize goodness? It is decided that they will go to Wittering, abandon the day Hazel's father died. Jack will be able to work on the beach, and she will help look after the kids. As if the fact that Hazel abandoned them was just a dream. They gather food for the picnic, and when everything is ready, they drive to Hazel's house to pick up a few more things, a windbreaker and a rug to sit on. The sun is shining and the day promises to be warm. The beach is sandy and not busy at all, and they set up on it. Jack with his laptop, the kids with buckets and shovels. With Hazel's help, they start building sandcastles. Jack shuts himself off from everything, even Hazel's slender body in a tight bikini, and concentrates on his work for an hour. Then they eat a picnic, and he takes turns playing badminton with everyone, including Hazel, who is ridiculed even by Amy for being so bad. Then he works again, but with an eye on the children. Hazel is sunbathing with her eyes closed. Then the kids are busy defending their sandcastle against the incoming tide, and Jack and Hazel are kissing, and it feels like a dream. Jack, you're a married man with kids, and I'm a newbie. I've worked hard all my life, and I've never had time for love. This is all a surprise to me, and I'm having to learn to deal with it. I was confused when I said those things about you. You were right. It's your principles that are being tested by Damien, not mine. I have no right to judge you, and I let my feelings for you affect my judgment. I have never had such feelings for anyone, and I defended myself by telling myself that I shouldn't trust my feelings. Then your wife told me what she had done to you, and all I could think about was the pain you must be in, the torture it must be. and I felt sick to my stomach at the thought of you suffering, and that I was adding to that pain. Believe me, it didn't take me long to realize who was behaving badly. I see how you treat your children, even Caroline, how patient you are despite all she has done to you. You think of others first and only then yourself. I should have realized my feelings for you, but I couldn't admit them. I also couldn't just apologize. I was afraid of you, afraid of what you would say, afraid you would reject me, afraid of doing the wrong thing. Sure, I've had boyfriends before, but they never meant anything. They confirmed everything I thought I knew about relationships: crazy, masochistic, dangerous, and ending in sheer misery. With you, I was out of place, and I responded with my own stupid ideas about how to behave, to show that I could stand up for myself and wouldn't tolerate stupidity from anyone. I didn't listen, and was blind to what was happening before my eyes. I was being foolish. Look, Jack, let's stop fooling around. I only came back because I love you. It's a damn awkward feeling because it embarrasses me all the time. And maybe I couldn't admit to myself that I love you. Can't you see? It's hard for me to tell you this, but I need to know how you feel. If it makes you uncomfortable and you wish you'd never met me, just say so. I don't like confusion. I want to know where I stand. Jack listens to this declaration of love in stunned silence and has to quickly gather his thoughts. That rose you gave me, I'm as sentimental as a 9-year-old girl, Amy. I'll put it in my copy of. It's capital, so no one will find it, and I'll keep it forever. Jack kisses her and wipes the tears from her cheeks with his finger. You're a smart woman. You know I love you, but you also know I'm confused. I can't believe how lucky I am to have met you, but I'm worried that at least part of what happened to Caroline is my fault, and I'm not fit to love you. And I'm terribly afraid, and not without reason, that this is just a dream, and you'll disappear as suddenly as you appeared. I'm still married to Caroline, which seems like a big hurdle. I worry about the kids. I worry about my work and research. I worry that I'll break under the weight of all this mess. It doesn't seem like a good time to fall in love. But then I don't have a say. I'm more experienced than you. I trust my feelings, and I know I love you. I couldn't be happier. I want to hold you tight against me and never let you go. He carries out his threat, and they kiss and caress each other until they look up guiltily to see if the kids are okay. The sand castle is flooded, the water at their feet. The children have moved to another fortification and are furiously shoveling sand to reinforce the walls against the flooding. Never has the sun shone so brightly. Never has the sea looked so beautiful and the golden beach so calm. Next chapter. Caution was unnecessary since Caroline was alone, but calling Damien on his home phone still felt wrong somehow. She decided to suggest they meet in London. Anything was better than spending the weekend alone. Damn, it's me, Caroline. I hope everything is going well. What would you say if I came to London on Saturday or Sunday? We could go to a show, have dinner, you know what? What would you say? It's something we've always wanted to do. There was a pause before her lover replied. Look, Caroline, I don't think it's a good idea. I've been really busy since the last time we talked. Guess what? I made it through a week at my new job. The curse of the cheating wife got to me again. Someone called my boss and told him the reason I left my previous employer. Even sent him your asshole husband's email as proof that I wasn't fit to represent my new glorified employer. Told me my employment was canceled because I didn't include all the required information on my application. Gave me a month's salary and told me I was lucky to get it. So I don't have a job. I'm on welfare, and I don't have money to throw around on high-maintenance mistresses. I'd rather hire myself a cheap and cheerful whore. That's terrible, Dem. Oh, how awful! Caroline struggled to adjust to this unexpected development. And I'll bet your shitty mugger and bully husband wet his pants with delight. Let's face it, Caroline. You're bad news. You're like the bumbling innocent in comedies who walks into a store and leaves behind chaos and destruction. Look, Dim, I'm really sorry about what happened. What if I try again to get Jack to admit to writing the letter? Don't make fun of me. Why would that psychopath help his so loving wife, especially if it's for her lover? Try being smart for once in your life. Yes, I'm trying to keep a positive attitude and I have a great idea. It'll be much better if you come here. I'll cook for you and we'll be very comfortable. You don't have to spend any money. I've had a busy week too, so it'll be good for both of us to sit at home and watch some movies. Come to your house? Do you think I'm stupid? What do you think we're going to do? Cuddle in your living room and listen to DVDs? You make it sound like I don't know you, don't know what's between us. We'll end up in bed. That's what we do. We have something more, much more. We'd end up in bed, and your psycho husband would find out about it and come after me and drag me out of the house. And then you'd probably sit with him and laugh about it. Jack isn't here. He doesn't care what happens here. He has kids now. Stay with me and we'll make each other better. Don't be afraid, Dem. We'll make it work. Truth be told, Caroline, you're not the person I'd choose to pick me up when I have setbacks. Since when do you care about anyone but yourself? If you're being polite, it's only because you need something. You're not the type to offer support. I always thought your husband had to be a saint to put up with your antics and running around. Let's be honest, you're good in bed, period. I didn't know you felt that way, Caroline said. Are you saying there was never anything between us? You know there wasn't. Everything else was an imitation on your part, a little excitement to make the week go by faster. We got together and had fun. I was fine with that. That's what I wanted. But you had to pretend it was more than that you were playing the part of some grande horizontal and thinking what a clever actress you were, happy as long as I flattered you like a diva and paid the bills. Cheap of you, Damien. Cheap and accurate. They were silent for a while. Then Caroline said, Are you saying it's over? You said it yourself. I'm stingy, destitute, stuffed, broken, finished. Nothing could be more finished. It was a foolish affair, and now I need to simplify my life. Walk away with the satisfaction of knowing you've dragged me down the drain with you. Caroline cried until she was in bed, unbidden tears of self-pity. As she fell asleep, she contemplated how cleverly she should have blown Damien off. Mostly it was variations on the theme. You bastard, let me think you loved me while you lied to me the whole time. But alone in the bed she'd shared with Jack for so long, the words confounded her. Instead of accusing Damien with satisfaction, she heard Jack use the same words against her. It wasn't true. She'd always loved Jack, but there was betrayal in his words, and she heard her own words echoing, You let me think you loved me, and you lied all along. The next morning she woke up with the energy she needed to take charge of her life. She wrote a list of things she needed to fix. The list turned out to be long, but it felt good to write it. The first problem on the list, because it was the most pressing, was money. There was an obvious solution to poverty: sell the house and find a cheaper place to live. She would talk to Jack. He wasn't going back, and he had no reason to object. Then there were the children. They were with Jack now, but should she let them go to school in Brighton? Of course she wanted them with her. She hated to be alone. She hated to have them away from her. And mother must always be better. But she knew that they preferred to be with Jack, and that his unwavering, reliable common sense was what they needed. On her own, she struggled to keep up with the heavy schedule of getting them ready for school, preparing meals, and putting them to bed. It was stressful and caused unnecessary conflict and frustration, especially in the evenings when they were all tired. They blamed her for chasing Jack away and were too young to explain the true state of affairs to them. The respite only came when they were with Jack. Jack was right. She couldn't put her needs before theirs. She denied it to herself, but when she said it out loud, she realized they'd be better off with Jack. Everyone thought badly of her, but she decided to be brave and do the right thing. Go to Brighton and inspect the schools. The next problem was work. She hated her new job and was sure everyone had guessed that she had been sidelined. Colleagues who had previously behaved defiantly were now boldly demonstrating that she had lost her power and blatantly ignored her demands. She blushed every time she met someone she thought knew about her demotion and imagined everyone gossiping about her position behind her back. The loss of power led to a loss of self-confidence. The only way out was to find a new job and start again, but she was paid well for what she did and needed every pound she could earn. It was only pride that kept her going to work every day. Then there was Jack. She reluctantly accepted the fact that he wasn't coming back. If it hadn't been for Hazel, she thought, she might have had a chance to win him over to her side since she'd lost Damien. But she knew Jack. Hazel had trapped him, and there was no way he could break free. Someday, but not soon, she would mourn her lost marriage. She couldn't do that now, because it hurt too much to admit her part in its destruction. Nevertheless, she could fight for a modicum of Jack's friendship and even regain his respect in time. She must try for the good of the children and because it mattered to her. And finally, she had to examine herself, a failure from any point of the compass. The weekend after Damien had given her the push, she'd driven 100 miles north to visit her parents. They were happy to see her, listened to her story, and never once criticized her. They asked about Jack and the kids and tried their best to hide their disappointment at not seeing them. She told them she would ask Jack if they could come to Brighton to visit the children, and they thanked her with dignity. She spent the weekend in bed, eating her mom's food, and felt a little better when she got home. But still, the weight of her parents' disappointment came over her, and she knew they were hiding their true feelings to protect and support her. That's what good parents do. Despite everything, she continued to believe that she had done the right thing. Her mistake wasn't having an affair, it was failing to keep it a secret, and when it was discovered, she didn't have the sense to convince Jack that he should let it go. Her love for Damien was genuine, despite his cruel rejection, and it would have been cowardly to go against nature and overreach. She'd taken the risk and been left on the losing end. But that didn't make it wrong. She wasn't going to let anyone say she got what she deserved. She took a week's vacation and called Jack to say she wanted to be with the kids and see the schools. He was kind, asking how she was doing and if her money situation had improved. He suggested she stay in his apartment with the kids and he would sleep with Hazel. She gratefully agreed, knowing that she should be thanking Hazel for his mercy. This week turned into a week of strange situations. Jack did his best to help her, trying his best to anticipate awkward situations and make her comfortable. At first, she thought he was doing it to get her to agree to the divorce he was now talking about or for the sake of the children. But then she realized he was doing it for Hazel. He was determined to show his lover that he could be civilized and charitable and help a woman in distress. In the evenings, Jack would come to dinner because the children demanded that the parents be together. They would sit down at the table and Ben and Amy would make them say nice things to each other. And they did. Jack no longer flinched when she approached him, and they kissed on the cheeks when they met. He asked about her job, and she told him about the change in responsibilities, though she didn't explain why. He talked about his research and the chances of getting more teaching hours. The children listened passionately to their parents, and she wondered what they were thinking. They knew that Jack loved Hazel, and they must have realized that their parents could never be together again. And she knew they loved Hazel too, because they talked about her all the time. Their world had been shattered, and they must have imagined that she would be pleased to hear how wonderful Hazel had been, that something good had come out of the disaster. She and Jack agreed to sell the house and split the proceeds. They discussed the divorce and agreed on an amicable arrangement that would minimize legal fees. "I'll do it because I know that's what you want, Jack. I'd rather stay married to you and not just for the kids. I'd wait to see if we could be together again someday." "Too much has happened. You can't put the egg back in the shell," Jack replied. He brought food and wine for the meal, suggested where to take the children, and asked how she was doing. There was no mention of Damien. She wanted to tell him it was over, but why? Jack wouldn't be back, and it would make him feel good to know that he'd won after all. They discussed schools, and she visited the ones on the list they'd made together. Once again, Jack was right. The kids would be better off in Brighton. Another crazy scene in a crazy and strangely happy week. She invited Hazel to come to the evening meal, and Jack played with the children while she and Hazel helped each other in the kitchen, kneading potatoes, making gravy, and cooking. She noticed that Jack was watching with mild bewilderment, but everyone was happy. Hazel seemed to have no anger or jealousy. Jack now allowed Caroline to kiss him and even hugged and squeezed her hand from time to time. He grinned awkwardly, and Hazel smiled, confident of his love. Sitting at the table with a glass of wine and laughing at her children's stories, she marveled at the irony of her situation. When she had been in love with Damien, she had expected Jack to accept her lover. Now the situation was reversed. Her lover was gone, and she was the one who had to smile and snicker as her husband kissed his mistress. Despite all this, she enjoyed the dinner and invited Hazel over again. Of course, she went to bed alone, and then she couldn't escape the nightmare of jealousy and resentment. Her family had been taken away from her, and she was left with nothing. Others were happy, but she was not. The house was put up for sale and sold almost immediately. She gave away most of the contents because Jack didn't want anything, and what was left, she had nowhere to keep. Her plan was to rent an apartment, but at one point she quit her job and went to live with her parents. They welcomed her warmly, gave her back her children's bedroom, and freed up another room for the kids when they arrived. Her father even gave her pocket money and paid for gas so she could pick up the kids. She was back where she had been 15 years ago, a high school graduate waiting to go to university, living with her parents in resentment, lonely, poor, and not knowing what she wanted out of life. Out of nothing to do, she tried to get in touch with a few people she knew from school who had stayed on to live in the neighborhood. They now had big houses, intimidating corporate husbands, and hordes of rowdy kids. Only once did she have the indiscretion to talk about the circumstances of the breakup of her marriage, but was met with such incomprehension that she never brought it up again. Eventually, she found work as an assistant secretary in an accounting office. It was tedious and underpaid work, but it saved her the humiliation of taking pocket money from her father. Now the children stayed with Jack during the week during the semester, and she would visit them or pick them up at weekends. At half-term, she would bring them home to her parents and do her best to create a comfortable home for them, always feeling that they would rather be on the south coast with the beach over the road and Jack and Hazel to create a fun home. One day, Amy announced that she was a vegetarian and refused to eat the food her grandmother had made. This caused everyone confusion until the next day, when Amy made it clear that she thought chicken and cheese were acceptable. Caroline was still living with her parents when the children moved on to the new school year and Christmas had already passed. She had fallen into a depressive state where loneliness, boredom, poverty, lack of stimulation from work, and fatigue from long trips to pick up the kids combined to render her incapable of positive action. She knew that the real problem was that she was hiding from her future. She had failed in her life and lacked the self-confidence to make things right. Her parents treated her like she was having a breakdown and didn't know what to say to her for fear of making things worse. Eventually, the divorce came through and it was just another bad day. She left home to protect her parents from her misery. The irony of her new life was that what she looked forward to most was the visits to Brighton. She went to Brighton the Friday after the divorce, hardly saw Jack because he had evening classes, and went home with the kids. They were having dinner, returning late to her parents' house when Amy announced, "Daddy and Hazel are getting married." There had been no conversation before. Now there was silence. Caroline noticed her parents looking at her and finally managed to say, "They must be very happy, but I'm surprised. I didn't know Hazel believed in marriage." "That's because she's having a baby," Ben explained. "How do you know that?" asked Caroline. "I listened to Hazel and Daddy's conversation. I hope it means the baby will be my real brother and not just a half-brother." Her parents were silent again, looking at her to say what needed to be said. Caroline made an effort on herself to gather her thoughts. "It's not like that, Ben. Half is because our family is split in two. You're half of my family, half of Jack and Hazel's. So I have two families, one here and one in Brighton?" "Shut up, Ben." wanted to shout at Caroline, but her own voice turned quietly to her alone. And I've had two lovers. Two is not twice one, and now I have no one to love. Caroline felt like she was being crushed under a great weight. Her self-serving lies crumbled, and she realized what she had done. Everything she had gained from her connection with Damien had cost everything she had: her home, her job, and her husband. She was back to where she started, and she had nothing to brag about in the 15 years between them. She had children, but only half of them. They were resentful and looked at her with angry, accusing eyes. They knew she had driven their father away and would never forgive her. She looked at the faces of those sitting at the table. They all knew it, and only she herself could not realize what she had done. The baby could turn out to be a girl, Amy said. If she's only half my sister, she could be half someone else's. I won't mind. Caroline hastily left the table and closed herself in her room. Left alone in bed, she cried all night. For the first time, she recognized that she had not just been unlucky, she had been wrong. Everything she had won was insignificant, like a gambler who bets on a stranger and wins. Winning once only increased her confidence in the eventual collapse, and winning gave a short-lived high for which she was paying for with the devastation of a lifetime. Ben sat with her after breakfast the next morning, irritated and unable to decide what to do. Mom, do you mind being alone? She shook her head. Is Hazel a friend of yours too? I think she's very nice. Are you going to get married again like Daddy? She wanted to say no, but instead she replied, I'll do my best to make sure you see Jack and me as often as possible. She knew it was easier for Ben to accept Hazel than if she introduced him to her boyfriend. And if she had a partner, she was sure Jack wouldn't be as eager to spend time with her, which was all the kids wanted. She hated it, but whenever she suggested that the kids go out for some fun, one of them, usually Amy, would say, Can Daddy come too? She said this even when she knew he worked 200 miles away. Another worry encompassed her late at night. The children loved her because she was their mother, but most of all they trusted Hazel. It was Hazel who made sure they didn't get hurt while she was alone and far away. She let them down, so they were right to trust Hazel. They learned to love Hazel, and when she grew old, they would visit her only out of a sense of duty. Hazel would become a grandmother to their children. She was the cause of it all. There's no one else to blame. And she had suffered too. Never again could she count on a relationship based on mutual support, trust on both sides, equality, where each knows the other is both strong and weak in every way, but will do their best to do the right thing at the right moment. People do bad things not out of a desire to gain an unfair advantage over others, but because they see life through the distorting prism of self-interest. She would never entrust herself to another relationship because she would never be sure she could behave honorably. Caroline wasn't going to go to the wedding, but she told Jack that she would take care of the kids while she and Hazel were on their honeymoon. The wedding invitation, when it came, was a pleasant surprise. Better to be there than to be alone. And she should be there, for the past, for Jack, and for her children. Other than an inordinate amount of effort on her appearance, she hadn't prepared for the day in any way. Her main concern was to remain calm. It was a modest event, a civil ceremony at the registry office, and a reception in one of the university halls. Hazel's mother and sisters and a few of her work colleagues were present, but Jack had no one. His parents had died, and his friends hadn't survived the divorce and job changes. Caroline, moving among these people, most of whom had reason to dislike her, thought she was here as Jack's only friend. It made her feel a little less like the ghost of Christmas past. She'd seen Jack kissing his new bride, which was fine because it was expected, but there had been an uncomfortable moment on the steps outside the registry office when they were taking pictures. At first, it had seemed a travesty of photograph that to the smallest detail imitated and ridiculed the picture of her own wedding with Jack, which had hung on their mantelpiece for 10 years. The same picture. Figures on the steps, the bride in the center and radiant, the groom smug with happiness, handsome, thin, and unchanged. Common sense told her that there was nothing like it in the picture, that all wedding pictures were the same and depicted a caricature. of simple bliss. Determined to hide her upset, she brushed away her tears. The photographer asked the bridesmaids and guests to join the bride and groom, presenting another vision from a nightmare. Everything was familiar and yet different her family, but not hers. The scene she could witness but was shut out from her. Her son, unrecognizable in his first suit and slicked back hair, and her daughter with ribbons and flowers in her hair, in a folk dress with ruffles and suspenders, a tight bodice, and a long, full skirt. Angry at her weakness, she began to cry, tears dripping from her chin. When Mimi asked if she was okay, she lied and said her tears were caused by happiness for the children and for Jack. She had to stay until the end and couldn't drink because she was driving. When she wasn't tending to the children, she was mostly alone or sitting with Hazel's mother. They chatted easily, telling each other how wonderful Jack was and what a great couple he and Hazel were. She wasn't sure Hazel's mother really understood who she was. Besides admiring Jack, what they had in common was that they were alone in their sadness. She stayed away from Hazel's coworkers, who, when introducing Jack's ex-wife, would snort ironically, "How odd," and trust Hazel to do her unconventional things. Jack sat with her for a while, being kind and gentle, saying how wonderful she looked, thanking her for coming and praising how well the kids were doing. "How are you doing, Jack? The second time around?" she asked, hoping there was no bitterness in her voice. "Good," he answered honestly. "I'm a survivor. I'm alive and happy. I have a great job. The kids are happy. I have a beautiful wife who is pregnant with my child. What more could I want? I'm sorry things didn't work out the way you hoped. I've made mistakes, and I'm sorry I've caused so much pain. If it's any consolation, I've suffered myself." I know. Looking back doesn't help. We have to put what happened in the past. Appreciate what we have, Ben and Amy, and be open to what life will bring. There's no reason why something wonderful can't happen to you as it did to me. Don't you see? It was that openness to life that brought Damien. I need to get a job and then I'll lead a simple life. Go to work, be with my kids as much as I can, clean up my act. Maybe I'll grow up. I hope we can be friends and I look forward to meeting your child. I'd like to think that in 20 years I'll have sorted myself out and be fit to be someone's companion. And if we can fall in love, even better. What I'm saying is that you mustn't give up hope. Take life as it comes, one day at a time, but do what is right. You're always a sensible, balanced man, Jack. I was so proud of you when we got married. I took it all for granted. Shut up, Caroline. I'm no saint and you know it. Forget about the past and let's stay friends. He was happy. Happy people are impossible to deal with. They just don't see the difficulties. In the final act of A Curious Day, the children were in bed at Hazel's house, and Caroline was sitting in front of the television watching her favorite soap opera. Hazel had gotten the idea that Caroline should stay in the house with the children while they went away on their honeymoon. It would save money and be good for the children. Jack no longer had an apartment on campus, and it took a load off Carlene's parents, who loved their grandchildren, but were tired of their depressed and angry daughter constantly staying with the kids on weekends. Caroline needed time to relax before trying to sleep. She didn't see Hazel as a rival or a conqueror, but she still felt defeated being in the house, especially since the kids rubbed it in that she was a guest, acting like she was at home. They showed her where things lay, how to turn on the heat, and how the coffee maker worked the modern bean-to-cup system, as if she couldn't guess. And though she hated herself for it, she wandered around the house looking for clues about Jack's new life and how it was different from the one they'd had before. Could it be that he'd really preferred sourdough to white bread the whole time they'd been living together and she hadn't known it? Or did he love Hazel so much that he was pretending for her sake? And the slippers at the front door? Was it really Jack? The next day, she threw herself into entertaining the children, and they all had a lot of fun. They went to the seafront, tried the rides, and went back to the crazy golf so Ben could show her how good he'd gotten. He and Amy didn't stand a chance. Her children were happy and excited to be with her. Their lives would be perfect if only she could somehow stay with them forever in their new home. And that, they all knew, would never happen. While the kids were in school, she was looking for a job. If she could find something local that would pay for housing, she would be able to see the children more often, see them in the evenings, take them to school, be an equal partner in their lives. Almost immediately, she found a job a few miles from the coast in Hove. She was to be shipping manager for a small internet company supplying brass door furniture. Not the best job, but better than the one she had. They were desperate for help, and she'd arranged to start work the following Monday when Jack and Hazel returned. For the first time in a long time, she was optimistic about the future. The next day, she found a 2-bedroom apartment. It was above a store on a busy street and parking was poor. When she got settled, she could look for a more suitable place to live, or maybe buy one with the money left over from the sale of the house. It had to happen soon because Ben and Amy couldn't live in the same bedroom for long. Her new job was hard. She had little in common with the rest of the staff, but it was a fresh start and no one had any preconceptions about her. She knew nothing about the business they were in, but she was determined to make it a success. Despite the newness of the work, she found much to learn from her experience and soon decided that she could be quite good at it. By the end of the first week, she had a long list of improvements she wanted to suggest to her supervisor. It was a joy to have responsibilities again, and a staff that hoped she would make their lives better. She was now able to participate in school activities and keep the children overnight during the week. Suddenly, life felt more normal. There was little entertainment, but working and cooking for the children became satisfying where before it had been a chore. Parking was always a problem at the entrance to Amy's school, and she squeezed her car into the narrow space. When she tried to get out, she saw that she had blocked the man sitting in the car next to her. She backed up and got out of the car to wait for her daughter. The man got out too and smiled at her as they stood at the school's perimeter fence. "Like feeding at the zoo," he remarked as he looked at her. "I wish they'd let the kids out on time instead of making us wait." "I'm in such a hurry, I'm only glad I'm on time," she replied cautiously. She knew the man was interested in her. He was respectable, well-built, plain, unassuming, seemed attentive and caring, but she felt nothing. No curiosity, no desire to challenge and influence as she had in the early days with Damien. It would be nice to have a companion, someone to study and talk with. But the complexities of being involved scared her. She didn't want to make a commitment and once again show herself inferior. "The highlight of my day," the man continued. "At the school gates, you meet all the best people. It's the moment of calm before the kids come, when anything is possible." He looked at her and she smiled thinly. He's trying hard, she thought, and I don't really care. What's wrong with me? The man must have realized what was the matter, because he didn't say anything more. Then Amy came out and spoke to a little girl who turned out to be the man's daughter. The man looked at her as if that proved they could be friends, but she smiled and jumped into the car. She seemed to have damaged something deep inside her and lost her ability to connect with other people. But later, she wasn't so sure anymore. Perhaps it was just the fact that she hadn't met the right man. Jack set pretty high standards. It was after Caroline's due date that Jack called and asked her to pick up the kids so he could take Hazel to the hospital. She rushed across town to pick up the children and took them to her apartment. There was no news for 24 hours, and she felt as tense as if it were her daughter's baby. When the phone finally rang, she let Amy answer it, and it was the news they had been waiting for. Amy had a new brother, who was named Oliver Graham, after Hazel's father. Caroline picked up the phone to check that everything was okay and to give Jack and Hazel her congratulations. She was delighted to receive an invitation to come visit as soon as she wanted. They immediately went to visit and found Hazel feeding a toothless, bald Oliver Graham. Caroline sat down beside her on the sofa. In her arms lay a miniature version of Jack, frowning sternly. At least that's what it looked like to her. Holding the baby in her arms, she was calm in a way she hadn't been in a very long time. Oliver Graham swung his arms, and his palm caught her index finger. Jack grinned. Ben and Amy crowded close by and stared at their tiny brother in amazement. Their family was complete. Her failures had hurt everyone she cared about, except Oliver Graham, perfect in every way. She had to be brave and stop looking back. Life was waiting for her to reach out. It's never too late to start over, and this time, she knew how to make it right. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.